Well, you've stepped into the smoke-filled room. Sadly, as we record this on Thursday with the snow and the sleet and the cold outside, I'm inside, and that means I don't get to have a cigar. So you're in the smokeless, smoke-filled room this week. Really depressing, unfortunately. That said, where there's no smoke, there's no fire. And apparently, in the veto session of last week and this week, there's basically been no fire. But we know fire's coming with lame deck session coming up. So I encourage you to heat up a glass of hot cocoa, bundle yourself up. Feel free to make it Irish and spike it with your favorite Irish whiskey, because we're going to dive into these topics. And to help keep you warm, we've got three guests who are going to help bring the heat this week. We've got Noah Finley. He's the Illinois State Director for NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Business. He also was the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Illinois State Senate and worked with their Victory Fund. So he's incredibly experienced on all aspects of Illinois politics. Noah, glad you're here with us this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Great to be here and to represent small businesses, and just to give a quick shout out. A week from Saturday is on the 30th is Small Business Saturday, so make sure to get out and support your local small business.
Well, and as the owner of a couple small businesses, I wholeheartedly agree with that. So any of our viewers who would like to toss us some business next Saturday, let's do it. All right, we've also got David Curtin. He's a lobbyist down in Springfield who has spent his career in politics and government. He currently lobbies for TMA, the Technology and Manufacturing Association. David, glad to see you again. I know we've spoken at a few things together recently.
Yeah, good to be here, and it's good to talk about what's going on in Springfield. So,
Awesome. And a new guest for us, we've got Josh Witkowski. He's the founder of XLN Services, which focuses on grassroots, government outreach, and lobbying efforts in Springfield. One of their clients that he worked with is Abate, Illinois, which we don't talk about enough. So I'm glad that we might get a chance to talk about that today. Josh, I'm glad to have you.
Thanks for having me on. Happy to fill in and be a part of the conversation today.
I support Abate, but I am not badass or cool enough to actually ride a motorcycle. So I leave that to those of you who actually are cool enough to pull that off.
Well, you know what? We can get you riding one anytime. Just let me know.
As my wife's one of the first people to watch these episodes, so I'm pretty sure she's going to have a few thoughts for you after that. We also have, of course, political experts, because everything in Illinois is political. So we always want to make sure we're hearing from Michael and Chris and Michael. I got nothing creative this week to introduce you to. So I'm just going to let you introduce yourselves. What's up, guys?
What's going on?
Good afternoon, people. I'm trying to knock off the ballot.
Yeah, I guess that is the season, right? It's petition season. It's knocking off candidates season. And my team is pouring through petitions as we speak. So we always have a little bit of fun with that.
Literally as we speak.
Let's before we get into Springfield, we got to just quickly talk about this week on Tuesday. The counts were finally final in a lot of these elections. We're going to talk about this very briefly because nothing changed. Everything we talked about the last couple of weeks has remained the same. Certainly some of the percentages, some of the vote counts have gotten extremely close, including in one race that I'm sure Chris will talk about. But the end result is the same. The seats we thought we were going to hold on to, we did hold on to. The seats we thought we weren't going to pick up, we didn't pick up, we as in Republicans. So it's pretty much the same. We don't need to spend a lot of time here, but I do want to open it up. Michael or Chris, any thoughts from you guys with those vote counts being finalized that you'd like to share?
I mean, no real surprises. I mean, like you said, everything that we were winning, we're still winning. Everything that we were losing, we're still losing. And Chris deserves a lot of credit for trusting the plan on Marty McLaughlin. 47 votes.
Well, I do think I'll get into Marty McLaughlin here in a second, but I do want to correct Collin. It does appear that there was one big race that changed. The Republicans were up in the third appellate with John Costello, which was a surprise. Everyone expected Ken Scrin would be the one that was up. Unfortunately, he was not. And John Costello did not survive the late mail. But though credit to him for being in this position at all, though I believe if he would have done some more campaigning, he might have found himself in a more better position than he was and might have been able to survive mail-ins. The big race on the docket right now that was confirmed on Tuesday was the Will County Clerk's race. The Republicans were able to flip the Will County Clerk's office after a vacancy came up after Lauren Staley Ferry. Now Lauren O'Hara became the Joliet City Clerk, and Republicans were able to flip that seat with Annette Parker. It's going to be a big seat for Republicans. It's going to be back up in 2 years. But as we know, being an incumbent county clerk is very good because you get your name on every single ballot, every single piece of mail that comes from the clerk's office. So it's going to be a big race to hold. Republicans are going to have an advantage in that front because they're going to have the incumbency, but huge pickup for Republicans in Will County with the clerk's office.
And you going to talk about McLaughlin?
Well, plan trusters, it was closer than we thought it was going to be. Apparently there was just a lot of mail in McHenry that nobody seemed to care about until Tuesday. But Marty McLaughlin has pulled it off by 47 votes. All non-plan trusters from the House Republicans to the House Democrats have been proven wrong again by a slim margin of 47 votes. I guess we're going to see if somebody decides to file a discovery recount or something. Maybe I don't know if it's going to happen. Peterson seemed like she wasn't really implying that she was going to do some type of recount. She kind of just said she was leaving the future up for grabs in that district and what her next political ambitions were going to be. But as of right now, it's pretty clear that Marty McLaughlin is going to win by the absolute slimmest of margins. But good work to Marty McLaughlin and his team. We did it, plan trusters, and hopefully we never have to deal with this type of race again.
Yeah, seriously. I don't want to, Noah, David, Josh, if any of you have thoughts on the election, feel free to share. I know that's not something you guys focus on a lot, but this is your chance if you'd like to. Otherwise, we'll keep moving on the agenda.
I think when you look at the overall election results throughout the state of Illinois, it shows the power of the map. Republicans did fairly well statewide, had decent percentages, and not a single seat changed hands. And on top of that, 3 seats were within 300 votes. I think it shows the power of being able to draw a friendly district.
Yeah, certainly when politicians get to choose their own voters, it puts them at a significant advantage.
Yep.
All right, well, let's jump right into some of our topics. We potentially have another guest joining us, so I'm just looking at my producer on the phone just to make sure I get an idea of exactly the best way to handle this. I'm thinking we're going to go a little bit out of order, so we're tossing things around on our guests. I pre-apologize for that, but I want to get into some of our topics that I know are related to things you guys are specifically focused on, and then we're going to get into broad topics like the budget. Next year's budget is obviously going to be a huge fight. We're going to get into a big discussion on that, but just in case, as we look at if another guest is going to join us, I know they really want to talk about the budget, so we're going to go a little wacky, a little out of order. But Noah, I want to jump over to you. One of the topics you wanted to cover that we've wanted to speak more about is energy in Illinois. As costs are skyrocketing, there's a lot of concerns over Illinois' energy future. I know it's something that you've looked at. Certainly, David, too, on the manufacturing side. Energy costs are mostly borne by manufacturers in the state, though nobody actually pays attention to that fact. So I know a lot of your members, a lot of people you work with are very concerned about energy and our future there. Noah, I'll ask you to kick us off on this. Just your thoughts on energy as a whole in our economy and where we're going and what we can do about this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And one of the things I think take a step back is we're seeing from our members month after month, their number one concern is inflation, rising costs. That is impacting their ability to build their businesses and thrive. And a key component in expenses that they're facing is energy. Energy underwrites many types of businesses, whether you're a manufacturer for sure, or if you're a plumber and you, depending upon the vehicle, to get to your work location. So it's just key to small business across the board. And we've seen, I don't know, like there's many things we can talk about here that are kicking in or could kick in down the road. So one thing that just happened last month is we're seeing natural gas customers are now paying an additional rider, the low-income credit adjustment on their natural gas bills. In most of the big suppliers, I think Mid-American customers are not paying this, but if you're Ameren, if you're People's Gas, you're the big ones, most of them should have seen a new adjustment, a rider that's on their bill. And that's to basically hold harmless lower income customers so they don't have to pay additional costs because of our green energy policies that are driving up the cost of energy. So small businesses in particular, this is hitting them. If you have a non-residential account, you're paying 10 times what a residential account is paying to cover this credit for low-income individuals. So that's one bill that we're going to see. Many small businesses across the state are going to see over the next few months, and then it'll be reset again next summer. So it's something that is of particular cost. There are others out there too. We're seeing a push, particularly in like Illinois. One of the great things about Illinois historically is we've had cheap and abundant energy. That has been
one of the few
great
calling
thing
cards
for
we
business.
have that can drive businesses here, right?
Yeah, it's an attractive thing. It's a positive. If you're looking at the net positives and negatives about where you want to invest, that has been in the positive column. What we're seeing, however, due to several factors, one is these environmental policies that are really pushing out some suppliers, like their coal plants, some of these other fossil fuel plants. They're being pushed out of the market, and at the same time, we're seeing increased demand through AI demand, data centers, crypto. These are all energy intensive businesses. And so we're seeing a lot of strain on our grids, which is resulting in our market for swing energy going up. And this is, as the Tribune pointed out recently, this could really see electricity prices hike significantly next year, and that's going to impact all our members. Like, as in, they all use electricity. I mean, that's pretty much across the board. While we're doing that, as we're seeing, our grid is under a lot of pressure because of falling off energy production while increased demand. We're also seeing some efforts to push more of our economy into electricity. So electric vehicles, that's something we saw. It didn't go anywhere in the spring legislative session, but a lot of the environmental activists, they went ahead, since they couldn't get it through the democratic process, they went to the Pollution Control Board. And that's now being considered by the Pollution Control Board to adopt the California vehicle emission standards, which would phase out the sale of traditional cars, vehicles, trucks here in Illinois. So that's a significant challenge for many of our members. Like I mentioned, if you're that plumber, you rely upon your work van to get you to your place of work, you need to have range. And we don't have the infrastructure there in place. They actually, I listened, the state of Illinois brought in expert from Berkeley recently to testify in his future of gas hearings. And he noted that Illinois doesn't really have the infrastructure for this recently. And
well, Noah, I don't know if you saw, if you chuckled at this, but I looked at it. I mean, Pritzker was out there just this week celebrating that the first electric charging station because of CEJA was finally opened. I mean, CEJA passed so long ago. I was like, are you serious? This is the first one you've managed to actually get up and running since you passed CEJA? Like, I wouldn't be proud of that fact personally.
Yeah, and one of the things that's funny is that, so this Berkeley expert at the Future of Gas hearing said that most consumers we need to look at limiting who could have access to the higher powered chargers, because not everyone needed the quick charge. And it's a question like, okay, like who's going to decide whether you get the charger that can charge a vehicle quickly, or if you get a charger that you get 7 miles per hour of charge. Like if you're only getting 7 miles per hour, that is not feasible for most people in the state. So it's very concerning, and our grid just isn't there. We don't have the grid that's capable of driving all these electric cars. And related to that, and I mentioned the future gas hearings, and this is also something that, particularly for manufacturers, for a lot of producers, the state of Illinois, the Illinois Commerce Commission is holding hearings right now to phase out the use of natural gas throughout the state. So in homes and businesses and farms, I mean, this is key for farms too, because there's some equipment that really needs natural gas. We don't have the electric equivalents to run some of these agricultural components that we need. So this is very concerning, and all these policies will increase costs for your small businesses, and they don't have a whole lot of margin to adjust for that, and that's eating into their bottom line. Really, it could impact whether they can grow and develop further.
Yeah, well, David, I want to get your thoughts. I know you represent a lot of small to mid-sized manufacturers, and a huge portion of their bottom line is energy costs, and every year it's going up exorbitantly.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it a little bit politically in the sense that the manufacturers, the people that are actually doing the work, creating the products on the ground, there's a huge disconnect between them and their government, basically. Their government is pursuing a clean energy strategy, ideological strategy, that has nothing to do with what's going on in the factories or in the plants. So they're going all green, getting rid of fossil fuel energy and all that thing. And now we're at a point where we're coming to a point where we're going to require more energy that we don't have. And our members are just getting wind of it now about how expensive it might be next year. Because we just don't have the fossil fuels, we don't have the energy. Springfield's trying to come up with some nuclear energy, expanding nuclear energy, especially with the modular plants. But it's kind of two forces coming together, and they're going to be hitting next year. So it's a big problem. The other industries know it's a big problem. They're doing what they can about it, but right now it's just hitting them.
Yeah, and it's only going to get worse. I mean, certainly I want jobs in this state. I want opportunity in this state. But you've got Pritzker out there celebrating the fact that they're bringing these massive power-hungry industries into the state at the same time as we're reducing our energy supply and our energy reliability. Those two things are they're going to careen into each other. That doesn't logically work, and that's concerning to me. But of course, to those who govern by press release, as long as they get the good news article out and the good TV hit at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, who cares about the reality of the fact that 1, 2, 3 years from now, when Pritzker's gone, we're going to have to pay the bill for all this, and it ain't going to be pretty.
Yeah, I think we can look at other places where some of this is happening. If you look at Germany right now and their transition away from more fossil fuels, they are suffering right now. They're over-reliant on green energy. It's not working out there. Energy bills are ridiculously high. It's really upset the political status quo in Germany as how it's affected people. The heat pump costs are astronomical. And then also, if you look at like Vermont is exploring something like this, clean heating requirements. And I saw some recent estimate, and of course, there's a lot of estimates out there, but they estimate for the small state of Vermont a cost of, I think it was 14 or 17 billion dollars, and Vermont's not nearly the size of Illinois. So this is potentially very expensive if it's not done right. And then the other thing to think about is it puts Illinois manufacturers at a huge risk, at a disadvantage, because if you can get a lot cheaper energy in, let's say, India, where they're building coal plants at a very rapid rate, and you're paying very high energy prices here, these manufacturers will look at that. Yep. And we might
policymakers don't realize, they don't think about
higher emissions because of it.
Yeah, policymakers don't think about that fact that our manufacturers, our businesses, but especially manufacturers, are competing on a global marketplace. They're not just competing with Indiana and Wisconsin and Iowa. They're competing globally. And so when you increase these costs, you put them at a significant disadvantage across the country, which not only obviously hurts our goals of employing people and giving them good jobs and good opportunities, but Noah, the point you were making, as we become an energy importer versus an energy exporter, we're importing energy from countries that don't really care as much about the environment. And so our net result is, again, we feel better about ourselves. We pat ourselves on the back as politicians because we got to put out a press release that said, hey, how great are we? But the reality is we've actually hurt the cause that we wanted to help. I want to move us to another topic that's exactly that same thing. Michael, I know you're going to have some thoughts on this as will others. The same idea here of good politics, but bad policy. So the one thing that it seems like Springfield was able to get done during veto session was passing the Dignity and Pay Act. As we record this on Thursday, it looks like it's being sent to the governor's desk for signature. And this is a bill that sounds good. As I describe this, at first, it's going to sound really good. This idea that those who work that have intellectual or developmental disabilities, this act will require them to be paid the full minimum wage. And I know all 6 of us, plus anybody watching, knows that we absolutely want those with disabilities to have full dignity. We support them. I've got a long history of supporting organizations and causes that help those with disabilities in this state. And it's an important thing to me. So the concept here, as I said, it's good politics because the idea sounds great. The problem is the reality. Even though you could put out the press releases and the mail pieces that says, ooh, we helped those with disabilities, the reality is that most likely this may hurt most likely this will hurt those with disabilities, because as you require those companies to pay them the full minimum wage instead of what used to be an allowed reduced wage, a lot of those companies have said we can't afford to continue these programs if that's the case. The only reason we can afford to do so, because it does cost us more to employ these individuals. We have to provide them support systems and oversight that we don't have to for other employees. And they're not as productive. So we need to be able to pay them less if we're going to keep these programs going. As a result, many have said we won't be able to keep these programs going. So when you say you want these individuals to have dignity, what I have seen is they find dignity in work, dignity in opportunity, and being so proud. I've been able to work with them and see them, and they'll hand me what they just made. And it's just so cool to see how proud they are of it. They have dignity in having the job. The problem here with this law that's been passed is it has a decent likelihood of eliminating a good number of those jobs, and that does not increase the dignity of those individuals if they can't even now get an opportunity. And so it's one of those situations, yet again, where lawmakers get to put out a press release and put out the mail pieces and the TV ads saying they did something, but in reality, what they actually did likely accomplished the exact opposite. Michael, I know you've been watching this closely, so I'll pass it to you first, and then if anyone else has thoughts, otherwise we can keep moving along.
Yeah, I think the important thing to know here is that hourly wage that these individuals are receiving is only part of the equation. A lot of times these employers are providing transportation from, that individual's home to the workplace. They're providing lunch. They have nurses, a nurse on staff that is assisting them, and even simple things like using the bathroom. And like you said, the productivity, I mean, a lot of times there's one in my region where there's like a formal wear store that, rents, tuxedos and formal wear for like proms, homecomings, etc. And these individuals are, shining the shoes. They, bring the shoes in, they shine them, and then they, take them back to the small business. So I think what you're going to see if this passes is that a lot of these places are going to say, well, I can hire somebody at the minimum wage that, is not developmentally disabled, or I can, have less productivity by hiring somebody, through one of these programs. So I think a lot of these programs are just going to go by the wayside. They're no longer going to exist. And you're at the end of the day, they're going to be taking these opportunities away from these individuals as opposed to them seeing an increase in what they're getting paid.
Yeah. Yeah. And the developmental disabilities people were up in arms over this bill. They testified pretty ferociously in committee. They had the tearjerker stories, and still they couldn't get them on their side. Legislators are very familiar with these people in their districts. They had tearjerker stories of people who they know after this is signed, which it passed today. So it's going to be on the governor's desk. When it's signed, they're going to be out of a job. However, it doesn't take effect till 2029. So the big conversation today was, okay, we're going to pass this thing, but you better spend the next 5 years trying to figure out something, how to keep these people from losing their jobs, because right now they're losing their jobs.
Yeah, which means again, now the state's going to have to appropriate more money for the problem they just created, if they want to help these individuals stay employed. And as we're going to talk about later in this episode, the state doesn't have any money right now, so it's yet again sort of a governing by press release on a wish and a prayer that maybe, just maybe, we can find some cash under a seat cushion, or maybe there's another pandemic and the federal government will send us a few more $1 billion to make it look like we know how to balance a budget.
Well, I think that there probably could have been like a little bit of a compromise here when if you look at it holistically and then take into account some of those other benefits that these employees are receiving as a result of working at these places. I mean, you got to take into account the transportation, the meal that's provided, the staff that, is there specifically to make sure that these individuals are taken care of, and the environment that they're working in is safe, and they have the ability to be productive. I think you take all those things into account and you say, okay, yes, we're paying them a lower than minimum wage, but there are these other benefits that they're receiving. Does that make up some of that difference? You're going to have families that are, their child, their grandchild is no longer going to have access to these types of opportunities. I mean, they're going to have to find out, okay, well, now I got to find somebody that can, oversee my child or grandchild while I'm at work or when I go to the grocery store. I mean, that's going to put a lot of cost and burden on the families.
Well, especially, Democrats who like to talk about how they're all about reducing childcare costs. I mean, to your point, Michael, this is now a care cost on families with those with developmental disabilities that's now going to increase, not decrease. And yet Democrats are going to find some way in their TV ads to spin it as if they did the opposite. But let's keep moving along because we got a lot to cover. I want to move us to another thing that's a potential increase in costs. As we're going to talk in a little bit about how the state's budget is woefully out of balance and how that's a huge problem, and how there's really no money to be had. There are still groups out there that are coming with their hands out. And what we saw during the first week of veto session is that one of those groups is public sector unions. They've been saying for a while now that 2025 is going to be their big fight. They want tier 2, if not moved back to tier 1, at least significantly improved to the point where it's basically tier 1 on pensions. And while they say that this is all about covering that safe harbor problem, if you look at what they're actually trying to get done, it's way more than that. They want pension sweeteners, they want benefits, they want an increase in not only the benefits, but reducing the retirement age. Lots of things they're looking for here that go way beyond just covering that safe harbor problem that we may have as a result of Social Security. And this is going to be a big fight in 2025. I know you guys represent business interests. Obviously, when the state of Illinois looks for the money to pay for things like this, they tend to come to you and to your members and to your clients to pay for things like this. We all want to make sure that the promises made are kept. So the promises that we've made to those who've paid into the system, we want to make sure that they get the pensions that they've been promised. But now here we're talking about increasing those numbers at a time when the state is billions of dollars out of whack. It doesn't seem to meet that sort of common sense standard. I don't know what you guys think.
So one of the things that I see happening is like Illinois Department of Corrections, right? We've got corrections officers that under a tier 2, which when tier 2 was passed, lawmakers were warned, hey, you may have some serious issues with the safe harbor problem and a few things. But we've got corrections officers now that are expected to work 40 years. My dad retired as corrections. And when my dad retired, he was tier 1. He's put in 22 years. That was it. He retired before he was 60. We now expect somebody to come in at 22, 23 and not be able to retire until they're 67 years old. That's a problem for a prison guard. Do you want somebody in their 60s being a corrections officer, having to guard inmates? That's one of the issues that's going on with this. And there's others trying to attach that to get sweeteners for themselves. But it's where do you find that middle? How do you solve a problem that exists like this, but address the other concerns as well?
But everyone's trying to, it's like the Christmas tree. Everyone wants to get what they want. I mean, the point you made, Josh, about DOC is a valid one, but I wouldn't equate a job at the Department of Corrections to a job sitting in a chair all day at a DMV facility, or, these are different jobs that require different levels of manual labor. One, it might be a struggle to make it to 67. The other, you could do it in today's world. And so I think that's the problem here, is that treating everyone the same is going to take our costs and increase them exponentially when not every job is the same.
Well, that's the main problem I was talking about kind of last week, Collin, is that there is genuine concern with like the way that the changing the tier 2 pension system is going to affect things like teachers, several AFSCME employees, the Secretary of State's employees, like you just mentioned at the DMV. There's a concern that, we might go too far here and end up throwing ourselves down more fiscal insolvency. But on the other hand, the Department of Corrections problem is real. The police officer problem is real. Fireman problem is real. All those things are real problems. So there has to be some type of balance here. And from a labor perspective, you can't show, you could, but if you show favoritism to the Department of Corrections, you don't show favoritism to the teachers or AFSCME or any of these other groups, then you're going to run into a legal problem at that point by showing favoritism. So, like, in terms of consistency, there's got to be some type of plan here that's going to allow people to help those who actually need help in this circumstance, while also you're going to have to help the other people too. That's just how this is going to work. And it might be a bad thing in the eyes of some, but that's just how this is going to be. And until we realize that, there's going to be a problem from a messaging standpoint.
Well, I think the problem, Chris, is where are you going to find the money for that then? If you want to toss the cash around, the question is, where does that cash come from?
Well, one of the ways that this was addressed previously is when they were all tier 1, police, corrections, fire were all what was considered high risk. So they had to pay in 8% into their pension instead of 4%. So there was additional funding coming from the worker, but it goes back to what Chris is saying. You could have an issue. Maybe labor doesn't want to put people in different sections like that anymore, like it had been under tier 1. But it is a very multifaceted problem that is going to severely impact the budget.
I just don't think it's
face challenges. Go ahead. As like the members of NFIBs, they're small employers many times, and they want to pay their employers better than they can, but they have to budget. They have to maintain a budget. They have only so much money coming in, and they can't pay their employers money they don't have coming in. And that is, I think, true of the state as well. Like, everyone wants to pay their employees better. Like, that's if you have the revenue for it. But if there's no revenue, you just simply can't do it.
Yeah. Talk about another group that's coming with their hands out down to Springfield that we're going to see in 2025. We've talked about it a few times, but not really in depth, which is the Chicagoland transit system is absolutely headed towards a fiscal cliff. As COVID money runs out, the billions of dollars they've gotten to balance their budget, that money's drying up here in what, a year and a half or so, less than that even. And so they're coming down to Springfield next year trying to look for some sort of a solution. Now, Springfield, what many want to see is some sort of reforms. But the problem is it's always the devil's in the details, right? How you do it. Those advocates for CTA, they want to see basically what I would call a Chicago transit system takeover. They want basically Chicago to have a say or to have control over not just CTA, but Pace, Metra, RTA, bring it all into one. There's a few reasons for that. Of course, it's a desire for control because every politician and bureaucrat wants control, but it's also the fact that the CTA has significant amounts of debt, whereas the other transit agencies do not. And so if this is going to work, they need to find some place they can dump that debt. And I mean, they've got 6.9 billion in debt, according to the last thing that I saw. Meanwhile, Metra has 312 million, Pace 138 million. It's just nowhere near the same. And I'd call them far left climate groups is what I would say, to be generous. They're trying to push this narrative that, the suburbanites are okay with it. They're okay with the Chicago takeover of the system. I can tell you, I don't need to see a poll to tell you that no suburbanite is going to be okay with Chicago taking over Metra and the RTA and even Pace. There's no suburban voter who's going to back that play, even though they're trying to spin that as the truth. This is all, again, heading towards, coming to a head in 2025 in session. We're headed towards what's going to be a crazy 2025 session, because this is another thing that's going to have to be tackled. I got shakes. Anyone have thoughts about this system?
I think just as you talked about, I mean, it comes down to the budget. It's like, where's this money coming from? And it's not clear that the state of Illinois has the resources that they've talked to that have been attached to this merger to make this work.
They're looking for what, 700 million plus, if not a billion. I mean, this is a lot of money when the state's already several billion in the hole.
Well, one problem I want to point out here is that in theory, you would be able to have like federal dollars come in. Like, I'm not talking about like the COVID money like Colin's talking about. I'm talking about like federal grant money, transportation money coming in from the federal government, from Congress, from the Department of Transportation. Those types of things in theory could help out here. The problem we're running into right now is that the state of Illinois is not going to get any money over the next 4 years from the federal government. They're just not. The Republicans control the House, and they're not going to get any money for the city of Chicago. And listen, I'm not blaming them. Like, that's smart politics. It's smart maneuvering on their part. But there was a time in this state where both Republicans and Democrats used to be transportation warlords when it came to federal money coming into the transportation system. Those people are gone for one reason or another, and there's not enough clout in Washington with a Republican president and Republican-controlled houses of Congress that you're going to be able to get any of this money. So it all comes down to money at the end of the day. And the state we're talking about a lot of problems right now. And it would be really easy to solve if the state had money. The state does not have money. So, you're running into a situation where you can either try and find more revenue, which they're going to try and do, and it's not going to work. Or you can go to the federal government in your handout, which they're going to do, and nobody's got the clout. Nobody's got any voice down in Washington on these issues. So we're running into these problems. And listen, I'm not a member of the legislature. I don't know how it's going to be solved, but there's a lot of problems that are running into just because the state's broke.
Well, and on top of it, they're picking fights. I mean, we'll talk about this in our next topic, but Pritzker wants to pick fights actively with Trump and then say, oh, wait, can we have some money for our transit system? Like, that ain't going to play. That ain't going to work. So, I mean, Chris, your point about dollars is certainly an accurate one. There's also one of control. I mean, having done most of my politics in the suburbs for the almost 20 years that I've been doing this now, it's been a big deal since I remember even the first year I was in politics, meeting one of the committee people who served in the committee from, I think it was McHenry County at the time, and I got a whole earful, a whole explanation of how important those board seats were, so that to make sure that the suburbs and the collar counties actually had a say in the transportation system. If you want this consolidation, the way that many people have approached this consolidation, it would absolutely dilute any suburban representation in policy decisions, financial decisions, and it would give that control basically to Cook County and the city of Chicago. That's a serious problem. And again, the collar counties, the whole suburban region is not going to back that, is not going to support that. So as much as you want to push consolidation, and the concept sounds like a decent one on its face, the devil's always in the details here. And if you're gonna put Chicago in complete control or Cook County in complete control of our regional transportation system, I've worked in other states where I've seen what happens. There's one client I'm thinking of in particular, and I didn't ask his permission to share details, so I won't do it. But he deals with this, and he's in a major, one of the biggest counties in the whole country, where they have this same issue, but their major city does have control over transit. And as a result, the roads are completely neglected because it all goes into public transportation. And so the suburban areas are all screwed. They don't get the investments they need because it all goes into the actual metropolitan area. And so I've seen this play out badly in other areas. And maybe I'll have that person join us next year in a future episode to talk about how he sees it play really, really badly in his area.
Well, I want to conclude with this point. I'm going to try and be as accurate as possible. There's a map that's going around on Twitter. Well, I'm never going to call it X, and it details the first referendum where they created the RTA. And all you see is that the city of Chicago voted for it, and I think it's the RTA. So if I'm wrong, but it was some regional transportation authority, so I think it was the RTA. And the city of Chicago voted for it like 3-1, if not more. And all the suburbs voted against it like 9-1. These types of ideas that the suburbs do not want a Cook County, city of Chicago control over the transportation authority goes back way back into the 70s, decades. So that's not going to go away. But the interesting thing here is that one thing we're seeing down in Springfield has been a movement away from Chicago-controlled legislature to more suburban-controlled legislature, as there are more and more Democratic seats in the suburbs. And because of that, it's going to be very interesting to see if these suburban Democratic legislatures who aren't as connected to the city of Chicago as perhaps former representatives were, are going to keep going along with an idea based around Chicago takeover of transportation. That's going to be very interesting to see.
That's a good point. You mentioned fights with DC. David, I want to go over to you on this. I want to talk about immigration briefly. I know it was something you were interested to talk about, and I am too. We kind of covered it a little bit last week. As Pritzker looks to burnish his national profile in what everyone assumes is going to be a run for president in the future, one of the things he's doing is hurting Illinoisans in the process. As he picks every fight he possibly can with Trump and DC, immigration seems to be the hill he wants to die on and to fight on. That's clearly going to be a big fight in 2025 and beyond. We just talked about how that has the potential to hurt Illinoisans because DC is going to be a heck of a lot less willing to cut any checks to the state of Illinois or the city of Chicago. These fights that Pritzker wants to pick with Trump, especially in immigration, other than the budget fight, that might be the thing that grabs the most headlines in 2025 in Illinois. You're muted.
Muted?
There we go.
It's really, am I muted or not?
You're good. You're good now.
Oh, good. Okay. It's really the last, 8 years or something like that. The progressives really have come into power just like they have nationally. And Pritzker didn't know what he was before he came in as governor, but he quickly became a progressive and became woke and all that stuff. So it's really part of a larger problem. He's not going to just oppose him on deporting illegal immigrants. He's not going to just oppose him on abolishing the Department of Education. He's going to oppose him on the changing the EV mandates and things like that. Pritzker wants to position himself and has positioned himself to run for president in 2028 so he can be the guy who the progressives love. It didn't work out so well when the convention came around. He fought for the convention. He thought he just took a chance. His team advising him, we're going to take a chance that Biden's going to drop out and they need somebody and we could run in a primary. You get it. The convention's there. It didn't work out. But he's very ambitious, and so the campaign has started, and he's chosen his team, and that's progressives. He's not interested in talking about how we can get things working or make things the balance. He's just looking at the presidential prize. So Trump is going to be the ogre, the bad guy, and he going to be the superhero that defends Illinois against all these bad things that Trump's going to do, which actually are good things Trump's going to do. Trump's 4 priorities: lower prices through energy and other means, secure the border and deport illegals, voter ID law, and make sure that we get at the deep state. The bureaucracy is now running the state instead of the politicians who are elected by the people. And so he's doing that at the national level. All of those national things he's doing have there are strings attached to state money. So each of those areas will have strings that Pritzker will be fighting with his blue governor buddies to not take away their federal money on this thing or that thing. And so it's going to be it's not just about migrants, although that is one big part of it. There's about 500,000 migrants in Illinois, undocumented. 11,000 came in the last year and a half into Chicagoland from Texas. It's about living in this la land that they've been living in and trying to appeal to the West Wing or the progressive wing so we can get into the West Wing. It's not about solving any problems. It's not about I was here this whole session. There was not one conversation on the floor of the House or the Senate on how we're going to attract more business to Illinois or how we're going to make it better for Illinois families here in Illinois, cheaper, how we're going to improve the quality of life, how we're going to make the streets safer. That all comes from the governor. When the governor doesn't want to do that, they're not talking about it on the floor. So
you see the Democrats are struggling with what does this election mean, and you see in other states they seem to be reading the tea leaves, saying, "Hey, you know what? The voters want us to get some things done and maybe stop focusing on these crazy far left policies." You see that in Pennsylvania and in other states where they're learning the lesson from this election. But I think Michael, you've unmuted yourself because I have a feeling I might be stealing your thunder, so I'll stop. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think the big test for Pritzker here is, can he walk and chew gum at the same time, right? He's currently our governor in the state of Illinois. He's getting to, you can tell over the course of the last year and a half, basically since he, won re-election 2 years ago, he's been very distracted and been focused on, national issues and sending his money to other states and jockeying for president. And then when he realized that wasn't going to happen, he started jockeying for vice president. I think that Pritzker is opening himself up to a big liability here because, we've got significant issues that are facing the state of Illinois, some of the things that we've talked about and some of the things that we'll talk about, moving forward on this episode. We've got some significant problems. And if he's distracted and focused on how am I going to become the next president of the United States, as opposed to fixing these issues, there's going to be a lot of voters in this state that are dissatisfied with his job performance. And that does not, if we take advantage of it, that could provide some serious opportunities moving forward.
You
Yeah, I mean,
know,
certainly having somebody in the governor's mansion who's actually focused on Illinois and Illinois families and working families and businesses, and that would be a boon, especially because we're facing some serious challenges. We've only gotten through about half of them on this episode in what we're going to face in 2025. This is going to be one of the most consequential sessions, and not just to today, but to the future of this state coming up in 2025. We need a governor who's going to actually care about Illinoisans if 2025 is going to go the way we need it to.
unlike a certain host of this podcast might have you believe, I can read. And one thing I've been doing a lot of this year is I've been reading books about old Illinois politicians, Dan Rostenkowski, Jane Byrne, Phil Rock, all those types of people. And it's interesting looking back on it is that you read through the things that these people had to deal with, is that they were oftentimes at odds with the person who was in the White House. Reagan, H.W. Bush, whoever. But they were always able to go to Washington and say, we want to do what's best for the people of our community. Even if the president is at odds with most of our agenda and there was problems and going back and forth to get some of that money, they still did it. It was a reasonable process. They never got exactly what they wanted, but they were able to put partisan politics aside for the betterment of their constituencies. And you don't see that anymore. Pritzker is running a purely political governor's office right now. He wants to run for president. He has no concerns over federal dollars or anything like that. And that's a problem with progressives in the Democratic Party, is that it isn't about the pork that comes back from Washington. It isn't about doing what's best for constituencies. It's about pushing an agenda that allows you to pursue upward in politics. That's not just a Democratic problem. There's a certain congresswoman in the state of Illinois who will lead you to believe that getting federal dollars is a bad thing for their district. But irregardless, there's a problem in politics right now is that people are not willing to work across the aisle for the betterment of their constituencies because they have some other political agenda attached to
it. Yeah, that's a good point. And that's the way it used to be, where the Republicans and Democrats, even though they would fight violently in Washington, D.C., they would still get together and bring back stuff for Illinois. And Chicago is the city that works, right? It's not the city that is in la land. We're becoming the city in la land now because we're saying that dog is a cat. No, that dog is a dog. No, that dog is a cat. And you can see it on all the issues. What about our energy? I mean, Republicans have been saying every single time they get on the floor, we're not going to have enough energy if you keep doing this. A man can't become a woman can't become a man. We're going to be the leader in people in businesses and people leaving the state if you keep doing this, and this. And they just ignore it. And that's because they're on this ideological plane that is progressive. And the most powerful interests in Springfield are the environmentalists, the teachers' unions the teachers' unions are very woke. And they don't care about the kids so much as they care about the indoctrination. And so then, and the trial lawyers. Well, if those are the three big groups, environmentalists are probably number one now. They're in control. And there is no moderate Democrat that's going to have a voice. So I continue to this. I think it'll keep going. I don't see that changing in Illinois. It's not like we had any seats change. So there's not going to be any groundswell support to change in Illinois, unfortunately, until the next election, if there's something happening, or 2030 with a new map. But that's where we're locked in, and that's what we've got, just because of the people who are the energy of the Democrat Party, who are, I'd say, half the House Democrats are woke, half the House Senate Democrats are woke. Those are the people who are driving the agendas. And
the people that get overlooked. I mean, Chris mentioned them, and I want to go to you on this, Noah. Is the people that tend to get overlooked when we say people, or just the entities, as small businesses. I mean, they tend to get overlooked with a lot of this for a number of reasons. David, you and I talked at a recent event where the big businesses, they've got huge teams of lawyers and accountants. And so, when Springfield passes a bill, they don't really care about it because their attorneys, their lawyers, their accountants, they can handle it, whatever. This won't really increase our costs. But then that small mom and pop manufacturer, that small business, they don't have that accountant or that team of accountants. They've got to pay each time one of these mandates or one of these changes happens. It's the small businesses that bear the brunt of that. And it just seems like this happens more and more, Noah. And I know groups like yours and others have been screaming about this for a long time. Hey, listen, this is the lifeblood of our economy. The majority of our employers are these small businesses in this state. Could we maybe get a seat at the table, and could some of our lawmakers actually care about our needs? I know it's something you're fighting for on a daily basis. I want to pass it to you to start us on that we really need our government to be there to have the backs of our small businesses in this state.
I think small businesses are so key to our communities across the state. We recently did a study of our members about how involved they are in the community, and about 90% donate to groups and civic organizations and sports teams in their local communities. They donate their time. They use their facilities for benefit auctions, all types of things. They are heavily involved in their communities. But what we often see, way too often, whether it's the federal level or the state levels, they're just there's a cascade of regulations and rules that they have to jump through. One thing on top of another. And they might look small when it's passed, but you layer them one on top of another and it really adds up. The National Association of Manufacturers put out last year a study on federal regulations. So just federal regulations, not state. And they estimated that cost the U.S. economy upwards of $3 trillion in 2022. So that's a massive amount. And their estimate was that a small manufacturer, like with 20 employees, they're paying about $1 million in regulatory costs to run that small manufacturing. This stuff all adds up. It's real money, and it really restricts the ability of our local businessmen, our entrepreneurs, to invest in their communities. And many of our communities are underinvested in. They're small communities, and if you have ties to that area, you're willing to invest in it. You see that opportunity, and you invest there. But your big corporations, they're not going to go into your rinky-dink little town, Southern Illinois, or your neighborhood in Southside Chicago. That's just not where they're going to go. It's the local small business owners who are going there, and we need to make it possible to do business in Illinois. They shouldn't have to jump through 120 loops. I talked to one small business owner recently who was talking about he's opening a pizzeria, and after he opened it, he started realizing just how many requirements, how many rules he had to comply with. And I think he was starting to have some second thoughts about whether that was even a good idea. He had no idea how many rules, how many reports, all these things he's going to have to comply with. And it's very frustrating. You put your time, your money, your reputation at stake, and there are just so many ways you can get tripped up.
Yep. Yeah, and David, I know you and I have talked about manufacturers facing this same challenge, where it's not the small manufacturer that's paid attention to and their needs. Thankfully, I know TMA and your SAM caucus are doing a really good job to bring those needs to the forefront. But the majority of the time, as you're having conversations with legislators and you're explaining to them that thing you just voted for, here's how bad it is for us and what we have to do to deal with it, and they look at you and go, "Oh, I had no idea." I mean, it's maybe get that information before voting on legislation.
Well, 75% of manufacturers are small and mid-sized manufacturers. And we do talk to legislators, and most of them don't have this background to know what they're doing. There are regulations that are going to affect us one way or another, and we try to tell them. But it's not till we get them into the factory or the plant that they kind of realize that's an aha moment. So most of the regulations they pass, they think they're just again, the energy is with the progressives. So they think they're doing good things by passing these regulations. They just don't know what they're doing. I mean, they literally are ignorant of what they're doing. And so we try to get them into the plants and factories, give them tours and that sort of thing. But quite frankly, I talked to one legislator who went out with a whole group of woke legislators, and they think the economy is great because you know how many ribbon cuttings I've been going to? And the legislator said, well, you know how many businesses close after 3 or 4 years in Illinois? And most, so they think the ribbon cuttings are the economy, and it's not the case.
Well, it does seem to be the disconnect. I mean, as the Democratic Party becomes more and more the party of high income, high education, They're disconnected from the average
Yeah.
working family, and so to them, they see the stock market looks great. Inflation is coming down finally, and they look at all these indicators, but they don't bear the brunt of it. They don't realize that the reality, and we've got this in a topic shortly, but the reality is that to the average working family, things have been getting worse since 2018, not better. But these politicians and the people that they're around, they live in this bubble where they think everything's great, and the problem is, and that's the lesson they're not learning from November 5th, that the majority of Americans have said, guys, this ain't working for us. And yet Democrats are like, everything's fine. It's, the meme with everything's on fire and the dog's like, everything is fine. And that's what apparently Illinois Democrats feel like right now. And as Chris said, we have to actually take advantage of that, because if the voters are with us, if they're saying, hey guys, we need some changes that are actually going to support working families, then we got to be right there with, actually caring about their needs, because they're not going to come running to us if we don't have a plan to actually say, hey, we do care. The other side hasn't, so we actually do care. And right now, your organizations, TMA, NFIB, ABATE, and some of the other organizations have done a good job putting forward your policies that will make people's lives better. My party, the Republican Party, hasn't done really anything to align with that and work with that. As a matter of fact, we just saw, as veto session ended, you had the House Republican communications arm say, we shouldn't even be coming back in for lame duck, which they're not wrong, but all they did was give the Democrats a chance to say, look, see, we want to make your lives better. Republicans don't even want to show up for work. I mean, our narrative should be, yes, we should be in Springfield and we should be fighting to lower costs for working families, but we don't have an agenda that does that, so we can't really say that. We don't have a plan.
It's true.
I think it's important. Like, Illinois is a very diverse state. We've got a lot of diversity across the state, but what we see in Springfield is a tendency to do a one-size-fits-all solutions. And that does not fit in a state like Illinois. We're a big state. There's many different communities, backgrounds, and to treat all businesses, all small businesses the same. Like, there's commonalities, but there's a lot of difference there too, whether you're the flower shop in Peoria or the staffing agency down in Herion, or across the trucker, the union plumber. We've got all types of small businesses across the state, and to try to apply one-size-fits-all solutions is just not feasible. And it doesn't allow us to really achieve our potential, allow our small businesses to achieve their potential. And we've got some protections for small businesses in state law. Say, for example, the Administrative Procedure Act. The Administrative Procedure Act requires, like, when an agency does rulemaking, they have to do a small businesses analysis. And what we too often see, to see how it impacts small business, is kind of cookie cutter responses where you can read that so-called analysis that we're paying the agency to do, and it's pretty evident that they put almost no thought into it. There's not really, even though they're required by law to analyze how this is going to impact small business, all too often that just kind of doesn't happen. And that's just really unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, we talk about that high cost of living. Let's talk about that next. I mean, it doesn't just hurt employees; it also hurts employers. This is a big problem right now. Is this soaring cost of living? I started to talk about it earlier. I want to talk about this here. We'll bring up in post a graph that shows this. But if you look at the median household income in the U.S., it fell all the way from 2019 until 2023, and it didn't start outpacing inflation until this year, 2024. And so you've got that 5 or 6 year period where the median household income was not keeping up with the inflation, and in many cases was going down while inflation was going up. And so while Democrats are saying everything's great, and the far left and the media were saying everything's great, this is why you saw what you saw 2 weeks ago in the election. The average American said, guys, I can't afford to pay my bills right now. You can say everything's great all you want, but the reality for me and my family is that it's not great. And the problem is in Illinois, it's only going to keep getting worse. Joe Sosnowski, representative who's been on the program, put out a Facebook post this week that the Midwest is expected to see an 11% increase in natural gas heating bills this year, which I've seen it be, some estimates be even higher than that. I talked about at an event last week how, we'll bring this up on screen as well in post, that the average grocery bill by state, Illinois is the highest in the Midwest. Meanwhile, Wisconsin and Iowa are the lowest in the country. Why this is notable is that states that have a significant amount of farming tend to have lower grocery bills because we're able to grow our own food here locally, and that reduces the cost. That's why Wisconsin, that's why Iowa are the lowest in the country on their grocery bills. But here in Illinois, despite the fact that we have massive amounts of farmland, over half our land in this state is farmland, in spite of that fact, we are still the most expensive in the whole Midwest. Again, this is the problem in this state. It is too dang expensive to live here. And I mean, Chris Welch in his post-election speech, I think this was last week, he said the cost of living is a real concern. Even Democrats are admitting that this is a problem. When we polled it, our Empower to Win poll back in October, when we asked people, can you afford to live in Illinois? It wasn't just a majority of Republicans and independents. It was a majority of Democrats who said it was too expensive to live in this state. The cost of living is killing our working families and our workers. It's killing our employers. And it's something we absolutely have to have a plan for as conservatives, as Republicans, because it's under the far left policies of Pritzker and the people down in Springfield that have exacerbated these cost of living problems. We need a plan to address this because this is what's on everybody's mind right now.
I mean, that's very true. Our month after month, when we do our small business surveys of our members, inflation is their number one issue. And I think that's just key right there. It's really hitting them hard. There's some businesses that are doing very well. There's some who are struggling more. And I've talked to members who've said that they've seen their foot traffic decline. They're just not seeing the same number of customers because customers are getting priced out of the market, being able to come in, buy that meal or whatever the equipment. So it is concerning that we still have, I mean, cost of living is huge for small businesses. Rising prices have been very tough on our small businesses.
Yeah, we're all seeing it. We're all facing it. We're going to go into the budget next. So that's the big topic. But Josh or anyone else, if you've got thoughts on this, I mean, cost of living impacts everybody, right?
When you look at cost of living, I mean, cost of living directly impacts small business right off the bat, like Noah's saying, because you don't have as much disposable income. You can't afford to go out to eat. You can't afford to go to a local show. You can't afford to attend the local fairs. All that entertainment stuff that people would usually spend money on for recreation goes away. But when you also have lower disposable income in a lower amount of time, your participation in the community goes away as well, because you spend more time doing side hustles, trying to make ends meet. And it leads to a decay overall of the community itself when you have this incredibly high cost of living. It also leads to a brain drain because you have to compete for employees as a business. You can only afford to offer so much because you're trying to keep your costs down. They're looking at similar salaries, different markets. They're going to go where the cost of living is lower and they've got more buying power for their dollar. It ends up just compounding on top of itself. And it is something that absolutely needs to be addressed.
Yeah, well, you mentioned, I mean, people having to do, gig work. I mean, listen, the state's even coming after them. I mean, in his quote, his interview right after the election, Kwame Raoul was saying one of the things he wanted, the first thing he listed of the things he's the most worried about that the Trump Labor Department might do is classify gig workers as independent contractors, which is something in the state of Illinois we've been fighting about. And this is a big battle. And now, the state of Illinois, the only reason why they want gig workers labeled employees is they can make more money. The state can make more money on full-time employees than they do on independent contractors. That's it. It's not actually that they care about those gig employees. They just make more money off of full-time employees. And so you mentioned there's people who have to do a side hustle, do some sort of a gig work, go work for Uber or DoorDash or whatever to pay your bills. Well, the state's even coming after them because if you're a full-time employee, now they can collect taxes at a higher level. Now they can collect taxes on the business at a higher level. That's why they want you labeled as an employee, and they're even coming after you. So these problems just continue to compound. And again, being in a state like Illinois, this is just what keeps happening. So we'll see what happens in D.C. This is the big fight right now with the labor secretary. Who's going to be Trump's labor secretary? Because it's all over basically this issue. I know John Lopez, who's been on, who's a good friend of the program and tweets me all the time. This is something he watches a lot because of he's been looking a lot at not just who's going to be Trump's labor secretary, but also these big fights over the PRO Act over the last year or so. And it's been a big national fight over these gig workers and how they're classified, and government trying to come in and get their cut basically of the pie. pie or more of their cut of the pie. So certainly something to keep an eye on as well. All right, I've been teasing it. At this point, the other guest who was going to come has been stuck in a meeting with lawmakers and can't join us. So we're going to go into the budget. I know you guys have been waiting to talk about the budget, so it's going to stay us the sexy six. We'll just keep talking, and let's get right into that state budget because it's we've been called a lot of names. Those of us who are on this podcast by Pritzker and his allies in the media, we've been called doom grifters. We've been called carnival barkers. We've been called all sorts of things because we've said the truth, which is you've used COVID money to balance your books. When that COVID money, that federal cash disappears, what are we going to do? It's going to leave a big hole. And wouldn't you know it, just before Election Day, too late for the media to cover it or these campaigns to be in any way impacted by this fact, Pritzker's GOMB came out and said, oh, guess what? It's true. Our next budget's going to be $3.2 billion out of whack if we don't make changes. The year after that, it's going to be more than $4 billion, and after that, it's going to be more than $5 billion, and this is just going to keep getting worse. No acknowledgement, of course, that we were right. Just sort of oh, hey, yeah, this is just how it works. This is just the reality, and don't worry, it'll be fine. We've been planning for this, even though they haven't. And this is the reality: is we are now facing a massive budget deficit that's not going to go away anytime soon without major changes in this state. I know everybody's got thoughts, so whoever would like to, feel free to jump on in.
Well, I'll just jump on the easy one. There's no common sense here. Common sense would say that if we deport the illegals, we'd get rid of $1 billion every year in healthcare, right? And you would allow for that would be $1 billion that would be freed up in the budget. That's what we're spending for free healthcare for illegal immigrants, whether you want to hear or not.
Just to clarify, David, you don't even have to deport them. I mean, there's some people who feel like, should we deport, should we not? Regardless of where you stand on that, I think we can all agree that if we can't afford to support our citizens, maybe we shouldn't be spending money on healthcare for those who aren't citizens, whether you want to deport them or not. I just want to clarify that.
Okay, yeah, because there's a lot of intricacies there too, and different levels of documentation, particularly within the families, and maybe we can talk about that some other time. But the families that have different documents, you don't want to break those families up. But the people that just kind of poured over the border in the last several years. We decided we're gonna pay $1 billion every year for their health care, as well as sign them up for all the other benefits. And so we're now facing a $3 billion budget shortfall. We need almost $1 billion for mass transit. We need the Chicago Public Schools is asking for another $1 billion. And we have no accountability over these funds whatsoever, but we've been operating with this, I would say they just aren't operating with common sense. The progressives are operating with, well, we just need more money for this and more money for that. And we're going to take care of these illegal migrants, not trying to fix problems, but just trying to, pad their base. So,
it's interesting on this conversation for healthcare for undocumented immigrants. I remember a year and a half ago, it was a big fight down in Springfield. Half of the House Democratic caucus was crying poor, like, we're broke. We can't afford to pay for these undocumented people's healthcare. And they were right. And then like 6 months later, the issue came back up again, and then nobody argued it, and they just gave it to them. Like, that's what like upsets me, is that like we actually had like half a debate over the issue of undocumented healthcare in the state. And then like when it came back up again, nobody seemed to care because it was a politically expedient issue for them to push through. And it seems like we found some federal money somewhere to do it. Nobody thought in the long term. And now you're going to run into this problem where you already gave these people healthcare and now you're just going to take it away. Like, okay, irregardless of whether or not you believe that it was right for them to give the immigrants healthcare in the first place, now you're just going to be taking healthcare away from people, which can you justify if you're the Democratic Party? I don't think you can. So now you've locked yourself into this problem where you're being regressive in your policy when it comes to undocumented immigrant health care, when you could have just not given it to them altogether, and you wouldn't have ran into this problem. You wouldn't have a moral dilemma at hand at this point about taking health care away from people. So that's how they got themselves in this trick. They got gaslit into giving these people health care, which again, it might be a good thing to give people health care. I believe in giving people health care. but like you ran into this problem where you gave it to them and now you have to take it away, and what you're going to do, guys.
Well, and this is the problem that they face. I mean, it's always a giveaway to favored groups, but average working families are struggling. I mean, this idea, when I tell people, we've covered it on previous episodes, this topic that David and Chris have brought up, when I tell people, hey, how are you doing with health insurance? I mean, we're now in that renewal period, so we're all going to find out just how much more we're going to pay next year for our health insurance, and it's going to be more. It's going to be significantly more because it always is. And then you have these groups that are getting free health care, and you're like, wait a second, my family is struggling to pay for our health insurance, let alone, now I got a little kid, so my health insurance cost just went up, my health care cost just went up. Dealing with, my wife has had a lot of challenges over the years. We've spent a significant portion of our income on health care, and so many times we're at the hospital sitting next to a family who I care for them and I want them to have the best, but they're, oh yeah, don't worry, this is covered, the state's covering this, you're fine. And I'm like, I'm looking at a multi-$1,000 bill. I'm like, wait, hold on a second, wait, why is it, we're a middle class family, could we get a little bit of help, please? Because we're struggling here. So it's those priorities are not in line, and the bill is now coming due. It's coming due right now in this next budget, and I don't know where they're going to find the money. I mean, we know where they're going to try to find it. They're going to raise it on businesses. They're going to raise it on families. It's the only way you're going to find money for this. Chris, Noah's been trying to jump in. Let's go ahead and let's go to Noah.
What we're seeing, unfortunately, is we're just not seeing growth here in the state of Illinois. We're seeing the budget grow. So COGFA released a report, the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability, that showed that the Illinois economy had grown 2.8% from the end of 2019 till this summer. That's when they released the report. The national economy had grown, I think it was like 8.6, 8.7%. So we're about a third. Our growth rate is about a third of what we're seeing at the national level. We're seeing that on jobs. So if you look at jobs in January 2020, and then jobs, the most recent report by the Illinois Department of Economic Security, we are seeing basically, I think the number was, we have 1,200 more jobs now than we had in January of 2020. And we're seeing massive growth, say, in Florida, Iowa. There's a lot of places growing, but we're just not seeing it here in Illinois. And actually, if you drill down into those numbers, the private sector, according to IDS's own numbers, we're seeing a decrease in private sector jobs. So that means we're seeing the data showing Illinois' population is not growing. It's stagnant at best. It's not really growing. So we're not growing a tax base. We're not bringing in new revenues in that sense there. And it's important, if lawmakers want to spend more money, we need to see growth. And that's just not the case. We have 5.3% unemployment rate. We just don't have the economy humming here in Illinois like we're seeing in many parts of the country. And that is impacting this whole revenue question, this whole deficit issue. And that's very, very concerning right there.
Yeah.
And I think that's just something we can't really avoid. We have to create a climate where people want to invest, where they want to move to, where people will start businesses here in Illinois. We've got so many resources here in Illinois. Great location, access to water, beautiful weather. It's, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful places. I've lived in many places. I love Illinois. Historically, we've had very cheap and abundant energy. We have a lot of benefits, but we're not taking advantage of everything Illinois has to offer. And we're falling behind our neighbors in the Midwest and across the country.
Yep.
I think, Kafka says what, 3.2 billion, right, is what they're looking at being short. Mm-hmm. That's before you get to any of the asks that we know about that are coming. You've got the mayor of Chicago saying that we owe the city of Chicago $1 billion for their school system up there. You've got whatever the transportation ask is going to be, and that's probably going to be $1 billion or more there. You've got the issue with the tier 2 pensions and how they may go about fixing that and how many hundreds of millions that could end up costing. Then, as if that isn't enough, you've got the Bears and the White Sox out there funneling around trying to think about public money as well. This is a large amount of money that it is short before you even get into serious budget discussion. And the one thing that I think could benefit the state, even when you had one party control, there was still a willingness to talk to the other side about ideas on how to cut a budget or how to do different things and how to make something work for all of Illinois. The last couple of years, the Republican side of it, the minority party, they don't see the budget till, maybe an hour before it comes out. I mean, yeah, they're a part of the subject matter hearings and whatnot, but nobody knows what's really in there till it comes out. I think that the governor, if he wants to do something to surprise people, if the speaker wants to do something to surprise people, say, hey, we're going to include discussions overall on how to possibly make some cuts and make some efficiencies and try to do things better. It's a good hope. I don't know that it'll happen, but if you want to try to do something that's beneficial for all of Illinois, you have to include all of Illinois in the conversations. And that's something that just has not been happening in recent years.
I mean, certainly be a little self-serving if the Democrats finally go to Republicans and say, okay, fine, we'll give you a seat at the table, because all they're going to do is then blame Republicans for those cuts and say, oh, it was those horrible Republicans, it was their fault, even though they've kept us out of the room for so long. This is their problem. They've created it. And I have some friends who said, fine, you know what, they created it, let them own it. If you're a legislator, you want to govern, I get it. So if you can get a seat at the table, let's get a seat at the table. Let's try to save this state. But there's also the mentality of Democrats haven't let us be even in the room for so many years. They made this problem. So guys, figure out a way to solve it then.
I think we're definitely, the concern is if this projected deficit, and I think it's important to note, like, this deficit, this $3 billion deficit, if we kept funding levels pretty much where they are right now, it wouldn't really be, I think we're spending about $50 million right this year is what projected to. So if we kept funding at current levels, we really wouldn't have to face this issue potentially. But the expectation is we're going to keep on spending money, and that's concerning. And what's most concerning about that is that means probably tax increases on hardworking Illinoisans, on small businesses, and that's taking money out of local communities throughout the state, people investing in their own lives, in their own communities, and sending that money to Springfield to be dispersed according to some obscure place that.
No, you're breaking in and out in your new location, but your point is absolutely solid. We just lost him, but I'm sure we'll get him back. The point is excellent. I mean, at this point, where are they going to go for this funding? They've talked about bringing back the progressive tax. Even if they try that, which frankly I hope they do, that won't solve this next budget's problem, because you're going to have to amend the Constitution. So that doesn't solve this next budget's $3.2 billion hole. As you said, Noah, they're going to come to small businesses. They're going to come to they're going to say we're going to go to the wealthy, but they can't. There's really not a progressive system. I don't know where they're going to find that much money. There's only so many taxes you can hike on businesses before you start having to start going to actual workers and income taxes. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go. Chris, I want to go to you just briefly because we're running out of time. But my question is this: is what we're seeing right now in Chicago basically a preview of what life's going to look like in Springfield in 2025? You saw the mayor say that he wanted to put through a $300 million property tax. That got voted down 50 to nothing. He said that they were throwing tantrums. It's time for them to grow up because Johnson really likes making friends every day. And now he's cut that tax hike proposal in half, trying to see if they'll support that. But that's not the only problem he has. I mean, he's trying to push this alcohol tax hike, and there's a huge coalition of businesses that have formed to oppose that. And already we're hearing that that's just dead on arrival. That's not going to go anywhere. Michael, I know you noted in our Discord that tavern licenses in Chicago are down 35% over the last 15 years. You saw a tweet about that. And so there's a reason why they want to fight this, because that industry is dying right now in the Chicago, and they need some help, not higher taxes. Meanwhile, you've got S&P saying with these fights in Chicago, if they don't get their act together, they're threatening to downgrade their credit. I mean, it's getting bad in Chicago. So, Chris, here's your chance to talk about Chicago, and then to the rest of us, is this what session in 2025 is going to look like down in Springfield?
Look, I don't think session in 2025 is going to be as bad as Chicago. For all our faults that we're going to give Governor Pritzker and the Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate down in Springfield, they are not Brandon Johnson. Brandon Johnson is an anomaly of politics in that he is so unbelievably incompetent that there is simply no comparison to how poorly one can run a government at any level or size. So, yes, I do believe that there's going to be a problem down in Springfield. I do believe that even Pritzker is going to come run into problems with the moderates in his caucus for trying to fix the budget in 2025. But I will also say that Pritzker is going to have an easier time than Johnson is, because it seems like there is not a single friend that he has in the entire city council. I'm sure Pritzker can find friends amongst the Democratic caucus in this legislature. I would be pressed if Brandon Johnson can name 6 members of the Chicago City Council who will do exactly what he says anymore. This is a problem. I don't know what the solution is other than what's the term? What is the term? A mutiny. A mutiny amongst the Chicago City Council. It's
going to have to happen. I mean, I feel like Johnson's almost begging for it at this point. He seems like an inept enough leader that honestly he would welcome. You guys just solve it. Pass a budget, solve it, and then I would like to move on to other things. I mean, I don't understand what else he's doing. I mean, and blaming them, I thought this was rich. I mean, blaming them for delaying the budget process when just bringing out his budget, he was way, way late. I mean, it's just Johnson is finding new ways each week to earn Clown of the Week nominations. Saying they're throwing tantrums because they're voting down his property tax hike, telling them they have to grow up. I mean, every press conference this guy gives is worse than the one before it. I don't know. I was mostly tongue-in-cheek about, is this what we're going to face in Springfield? It was just an excuse to let Chris talk about how horrible things are in Chicago, because I never let Chris talk about Chicago. Any final thoughts on this topic, Chris, especially from the Chicago angle?
I mean, do you want to talk about the mayor stuff? I know it's
sure. Why don't I transition to that? I like to get in. This has been a very heady, very policy-focused episode. I like to let us have a little bit of fun. So let's talk politics for one final topic before we close down. With how inept Brandon Johnson has been, it's opened the door for a whole bunch of conversations about who's going to run and replace him. As Chris has said, and I wholeheartedly agree, Brandon Johnson is the very definition of a one-term politician. There is no way he makes a runoff, let alone gets reelected. So the conversation is who's running, who's in. You saw Marianne Ahern put out that she's hearing people say that they want Alexi Janulius to run. You saw several articles the last couple of weeks about how people are hoping Rahm Emanuel comes back from Tokyo to run. Susana Mendoza has been floating her own name for several years now. There's a lot of names floating around here on who wants to run for Chicago mayor. At this point, even though this election is several years away, it's pretty much already started. With how inept Johnson is, the jockeying has begun. So as with any Chicago topic, Chris, you get to kick us off, but if anyone else has thoughts after Chris, go for it.
Well, I'll begin with, I don't necessarily believe the Rahm Emanuel rumor. I think that's more so people long for the days of Rahm Emanuel, even though everybody complained about Rahm Emanuel at the time. It's just, you never know how bad things can get, and they keep on getting worse, so Rahm Emanuel's name's going to get thrown around. If Richard M. Daley was of healthy governing age, his name would also probably be thrown around at this point. But the problem that I'm seeing right now is that we're entering into another clown car situation. There's a number of solid, quality candidates being thrown around there. They're talking about Janulius, they're talking about Mendoza, they're talking about Quigley, they're talking about Conway, they're talking about Hopkins. So a lot of very, very solid candidates being thrown around there. The problem, though, that I'm seeing is that there's simply too many of them. And it's going to come down to who can consolidate enough special interest and ethnic groups around themselves to push themselves into a runoff. We've named probably 5 or 6 white candidates for mayor during the course of this conversation. And anybody who will tell you that ethnic politics doesn't matter in Chicago is lying to you. And if you have 5 white candidates run, and maybe 2 Hispanics and 2 African-American candidates, you're not going to have a white candidate make the runoff. That's just how these things work in Chicago. So that's what the concerning things right now. Part of the reason why Paul Vallis even got as far as he did was because he was the only white candidate. He was able to consolidate that ethnic voting bloc. So that's what we're going to be looking at going forward here. What I would presume is going to happen is that over the course of the next 2 years, you're going to hear a lot of people sit down, trying to cut some deals, trying to make sure that there are major candidates running for the city of Chicago, because the powers that be, to whatever extent they still exist in the city of Chicago, know that they have to take the Chicago mayor's race seriously. They cannot shoehorn in Chuy Garcia like they did last time, and they can't have Vallis dump money on pointless exercises like they did in 2023. So there's got to be some people come to the table, pick a serious candidate. Maybe it's Mendoza, maybe it's Janulius. I think it's more likely to be Mendoza than Janulius, but what do I know? Let's come together, pick a candidate, and let's end this embarrassment once and for all, and let's get some competent government back in the city of Chicago.
Anyone else have thoughts? It's fun to play politics. It's fun to prognosticate.
I mean, I agree with Chris. I think that consolidation is key. And if somebody wants, change in Chicago, they've got to identify that person and everybody's got to get behind them. You can't have like we had last time where it was just this clown car of so many candidates that were all jockeying for it. And then, Johnson basically wins by default, as a result. So
I think Chris's point of do those power brokers exist? I mean, the only way you consolidate a field is if power brokers make it happen. The question is, who are those power brokers that can do that? I don't know that that's possible, if that's going to happen, but we'll see.
So I think that as you look at what's happening in Chicago, you have to question, does it affect Chicago's efforts at the State House? Chicago is generally a powerhouse at the Capitol building, but given what's going on up there, do they retain that level of power? I mean, when you have a mayor that is as unpopular as Brandon Johnson is, does he get as many asks as what he's wanting down at the State House? So that's one part of how the Chicago stuff's going to play into what's going on at State House. But the other part is the reason why all these names are being bandied about is because of that unpopularity. And I think that you're going to see a lot of that change, though, because there's another office out there that may have an effect on this race, and that's U.S. Senator. We've got Senator Durbin, who hasn't announced his intentions yet. And several of the people that are being bandied about for Chicago's mayor have also at one point or another expressed interest in being senator from the great state of Illinois. So I think you got to wait and see how that plays out first before you get a better sense of the Chicago guessing game.
And there's the question, even does Pritzker run again? I mean, you've got 7 statewide offices in 2026, then obviously Chicago mayor in 2027. There's a lot that's going to happen over the next 2 years, and there's a lot of jockeying going on for who wants what seat if this becomes available or that becomes available. It's certainly going to get cutthroat. But Josh, to your point, I think the absolute worst job in the entire state of Illinois, forget emptying bedpans, forget the tough jobs of those dirty jobs that the TV show shows. The absolute worst job is being Brandon Johnson's liaison to Springfield. I would not wish that job on my worst enemy.
I know the people that are doing it. They're doing the best that they can. They're very capable individuals, and I feel for them every day. They're actually really good people to work with when you can work with them. And yeah, I definitely feel for them given what's going on right now. And one other name that's being thrown out there that I didn't hear mentioned is Anna Valencia, the city clerk. Yeah. And I will tell you that is a very capable and possibly formidable individual up there.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll certainly see a lot of names, but Chris, let the Durbin pitch go by because we're running out of time.
I just wanted to make the point of that's 3 Latinas from the Southwest side that have been thrown out as possible mayoral candidates: Mendoza, Valencia, and Tabarez. So, I mean, one of them's going to have to, we're going to have to settle on one of them.
We'll see what happens. Lots of fun to be had for those of us that enjoy the game of politics. All right, we got to close down here. As always, we have some fun in our final segment. Not everybody has to participate. Don't want to get anybody in trouble. But for the, if you'd like, OG and Clown of the Week nominations, this is the time to do it. OG, somebody who over the past week deserves praise for something they did, ideally in Illinois politics, but it could be anywhere. And then Clown of the Week nominations, anybody who deserves scorn. Feel free to toss any names in you'd like to have considered for this week. I know Chris and Michael always have lists. Go ahead.
I meant to throw this one out there last week, but I was too busy yelling at Max Solomon to add this one. That's Congressman Ro Khanna of the state of California. Now, Congressman Khanna, he has presidential ambition, so he wants to say the right thing after the Democrats got smoked nationally in this election. And he's talking about, well, we need to bring new voices into our party. We need to be more understanding of people who might disagree with us on a number of issues. And while he's right about that, the problem is Ro Khanna's been doing the exact opposite ever since he got involved into politics. He's been passing purity tests on the abortion and LGBT issues, and every congressional primary he's ever endorsed it. So Ro Khanna, yeah, you're right, but you're not actually following your own advice. So, buddy, figure it out.
All right.
I was gonna say on Clown of the Week, and I'm sure we might talk about this next week, but Sonia Harper, she filed a bill in Springfield to require any business or company that has contracts with the state of Illinois to disclose if they were ever associated with the slave trade. And I'm like, this is just splitting hairs here. And obviously, I mean, we live in Illinois. Nobody's ever owned slaves in the state. It was a free state. So, I mean, we're going to go back to the 1700s.
Yeah, I probably second that. I saw that bill, and it does make your head hurt. But it also, when you're talking about being sometimes Illinois can be seen as a laughing stock in some of the jokes about our governors going to prison and that sort of thing. But when this stuff comes to, like California is trying to do with reparations, when this stuff comes to Illinois, I nominate her as well. So
there you go, Michael. I figured you'd probably talk about the Madison County Democrats social media post too.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. So they put out a Facebook post following this November election, basically comparing the presidential election results to 9/11 and saying that you should feel similarly about Trump's victory as we did, when terrorists attacked this country. That's way high on the list for clown of the week for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's for a party that's spent the last several years trying to scare people as much as possible. Let's not equate an electoral result to 9/11.
Yeah,
I'd like to break the rules a little bit though and change things for my shout out. Because life is much more than politics, and there's a lot of good out there. And this past week, the U.S. men's soccer team won 4-2 against Jamaica in St. Louis. So that was a really cool moment, and especially since it's right here in the Midwest, just across the river. I think they deserve a shout out.
Chris and I we do that all the time. I mean, usually it was to use our Clown of the Week nomination in either the Bears or the White Sox, but which I think after this last election, this last week, I have to put the Bears in the Clown of the Week category. And maybe we could get a head coach one of these days who could actually prepare these players to go out and play, because this has been just gruesome to have to watch.
Go Pack, go!
Yeah. I've got a couple. So Glen Ellen Village Board President Mark Senack was unhappy that the biennial caucus did not choose him. They chose one of the other trustees in their slating for village president. So he threw his hands up and just quit. Didn't want to run, didn't want to have to run as an independent, didn't even want to finish out his term serving the public. He just quit and said, well, this is the best thing for the village is for me to leave because clearly you people don't want me. And then he came back to several board meetings to air his grievances and show how unhappy he was, which just proved he quit just out of spite, not actually because he was doing it for the best thing for the village. And if you're elected to do a job, then do the damn job. Even if you don't get elected the second time, do the job you were elected to do. So Clown of the Week for me, absolutely. Next, CTU. They're holding a big rally today as we record this on Thursday. The Resist Trump's Project 2025 rally. So we can't get them to, sit at the table and finalize a contract or, get on the same page on budgets and, educating kids, but they certainly have time to go out and do an overly political rally about national politics that has nothing to do with the actual Chicago public schools, focusing on the racist, sexist, anti-LGBTQ, anti-worker agenda being planned by the Trump administration. That's not your job. Educate kids, and you're not doing that job. So maybe focus on that before you start holding these rallies. Last one for me, because she's on her way out the door, and I feel really sad that Kim Foxx's name hasn't been mentioned in this segment for a while. So she's the last one for me, just based on the Sun-Times article where he said that she sees her legacy as helping the community trust law enforcement, because apparently that's what she thinks she's been doing for 8 years, is helping increase trust in law enforcement in Chicago, Cook County, and the surrounding area. That's what she sees as her legacy, and the complete disconnect from reality in Kim Foxx's brain deserves a Clown of the Week nomination from me as well. So those are my three.
Good.
All right, as always, our guests get a chance to talk about anything they want in their closing thoughts as we shut down. I'm going to start with my team and then let our guests close us off. Chris, you're unmuted, so go ahead and go first.
Well, everyone, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. This is, another great week. We can enjoy, turkey. We can watch, the Packers win. We can watch the Bears lose because the Bears play on. Yeah, you guys play this.
Yeah, we play the Lions. It ain't going to go really well.
Yeah, we can watch the Bears lose. You can watch the Packers win. You can take your nap during Cowboys, Giants. I think it's going to be a great Thanksgiving this year. So everybody enjoy your Thanksgiving, and just don't get kicked off the ballot because that's due on Monday. So good luck.
Chris, you want to explain to our loyal viewers what's wrong with your hand there?
Oh, it's a flag football injury.
He likes to say it was flag football, but really just he got it stuck in the toilet seat.
Yeah.
Michael, your final thoughts for the week.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this Thanksgiving is upon us. There's a lot to be thankful for. Enjoy time with your family and friends, because we got wild 2 years ahead of us between lame duck session, municipal elections, 2026. It'll be here before we know it. So get some rest and enjoy some downtime because we all deserve it.
Yes, it's true. All right, of our guests, I want to start with the Ricky Gervais lookalike, Josh Witkowski, with your final thoughts as we close on the episode. Thanks for being here with us this week.
Thanks for having me this week. Definitely was interesting. Obviously, there is a lot to be thankful for. Be thankful we're even carrying on conversations like this, that we have an engaged electorate here in the state of Illinois. We do have a lot of good groups that try to push their beliefs, their agendas forward. I think that that's always something to be thankful for. The other thing is the unintended consequences of what's supposed to be good feeling legislation. You talked about that at the beginning. A couple different parts to that. Noah mentioned the attempt to bring California regulations to Illinois with emissions. A lot of people don't realize that prevents motorcyclists from being able to work on their own vehicles. Yeah. That it's one of the unintended consequences. The California Air Resources Board says that a lot of the parts that we use is not compliant for what they want. So we're unable to get parts for fairly recent motorcycles. I've got a 2016 motorcycle out in my garage that I would not be able to repair myself if we adopted California style standards for the state of Illinois. So unintended consequences of what's supposed to be feel good legislation. The other one is going to come up in lame duck. It's this Karina's bill. Ostensibly, it is an attempt to prevent people who are victims of domestic violence from potentially suffering further firearms violence from an abusive partner. But what they're not telling you is that it eliminates due process. All it takes is an individual to file a complaint, and police are to show up at your house and seize your firearms. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled due process is important. They ruled that in Rahimi. We're going to see a push for this bill. Nobody wants to protect domestic abusers, not one bit. We all agree that they should probably have some serious things taken care of. But at the same time, nobody wants to see the police show up at your door to execute a raid simply based on an allegation without any kind of due process hearing having been done. And that's going to be a big fight coming up in lame duck.
Thanks for bringing that up. We'll absolutely keep an eye on it, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it in coming episodes.
Yep.
David Curtin, my friend, who I've had the honor of knowing for a long time, your final thoughts for the week.
Well, I'm thankful like everyone else, and I'm actually thankful for two things. One is the real crack in the blue wall this year was not in Michigan, or the real crack in the blue wall to me was the 15% African American vote that Trump got, and it reflected itself in the city of Chicago as well. That is going to keep widening. It's not a Trump phenomenon, and you get past a certain point, 20%, 25%. There has to be some moderate Democrats. You can't win an election with less than 80% of the black vote, or certainly 75% of the black vote. So the fact that that has cracked means that there are opportunities to work together on issues and actually solve some issues rather than this whole la-la land that I've been talking about. But the second thing is the January, I think we ought to buckle up. There are a lot of people burning the midnight oil here in Springfield during the holidays in December, and they're working on what they're going to be doing here in early January, and for the Pritzker grandstanding. And so the revenues are all right. They've got enough band-aids that they could probably get through the budget. They could probably punt on the pension thing for 2 years because they can. So they could probably get through a session, and I'm sure they'll have to raise taxes, but the world's not going to end. But it will be quite a tumultuous 2025 because we are here in Illinois. ground zero with Governor Pritzker trying to thwart what President Trump is doing. So I think it's going to be a very interesting. We'll be able to have a close-up view of what's happening nationally with opposing Trump, the resistance.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Appreciate your thoughts. Noah, thanks for bringing the heat this week. You get the final word.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on today and kind of on this theme of Thanksgiving. I think it's important that we keep in perspective that we do live in a country with unrivaled prosperity and freedom. Even though there are things sometimes we don't like about our government, or sometimes our fellow citizens pursue policies we don't like. And it's really, we live in a wonderful place. But there are a couple things I do want to flag for your listeners that are happening at the federal level that people in Illinois should be aware of. But, one is that at the end of 25, the small business deduction is set to expire. That will impact pass-through businesses across the nation if it's not extended. NFIB held a forum last week. Congressman Snyder participated in that. Appreciate that. And it's very important for our small businesses that this is made permanent. The second issue I really want to flag for everyone is on January 1st, the new beneficial ownership information reporting requirements are going into place for small businesses across the country. So that's small businesses with 20 or fewer employees and revenues of less than 5 million. They have to report their beneficial information for anyone with substantial control of their business to the federal government. There's a whole process you have to go through. It's what you're talking about earlier about this red tape that costs and ads and ads and ads. And it's not just, there's some significant consequences if you don't do it, as far as fines, $500 a day up to $10,000. If you meet a certain criteria, you can even face prison time. So it's pretty crazy. We're challenging
having had to do it myself, you also have to put through like an image of your passport or your driver's license. There's a lot you're having to put through, and I'm usually the kind of guy who's like, fine, I'll fill out the paperwork. This one I was like, really? Do I really have to do this? But we did it because we had to.
It's extensive. We're challenging it in court. We would love to get it thrown out, but there's been no response yet at this point. So it is something that I think small business owners need to be aware of. And if there's ways that we can assist, people need more information about it, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Thanks, Noah, for being with us. As you mentioned, Thanksgiving's coming up next week. We encourage you to spend time with family, which means we're not going to be back in your inboxes next week on purpose, because we got to spend time with our families too. So no SFR next week. We will likely be back the week after that, and then maybe we're going to take some time off in December for the holidays. We're still talking about our plans. As David Curtin said, though, lame duck is coming. January 2nd through January 7th, maybe even into January 8th. Democrats are making big plans for what they want to get done down in Springfield when they only need a 50% or just barely over 50% majority to pass bills. So be paying attention. If you're going to shut it down for the holidays, that's fine, but keep an eye on Springfield because Democrats have a whole agenda they want to push through from January 2nd until the actual inauguration of the beginning of the next session. So don't put your feet up all the way and completely shut off your phone. We still got work to do. So take next week, spend time with family, and then come back as we'll see you in 2 weeks on the Smoke Filled Room. In the meantime, happy Thanksgiving, and we hope you enjoy your time with family.